Welcome back to the Contemporary Old West channel with BF Biles. If you enjoy westerns, I hope you'll give my channel a shot and hit that subscribe button. In today's episode, you'll hear Chapter 7 of my novel, Hunting Charm. If you haven't listened to the previous chapters, I recommend you do so. I have the first 6 in a playlist. It's probably best you start with Chapter 1. Today's Blade of History Beans, in which I look at something from the chapter, we'll look briefly at the Comanche Chief Quanah Parker. So, here's Chapter 7 of Hunting Charm, A Sack of Bacon. Hunting Charm, Chapter 7, A Sack of Bacon. Bucky and Bart left Abilene for Indian Territory with an entirely false notion of their destination. Their errant impression was based upon a story told by a myopic drunk named Cleveland, who claimed he had spotted a Comanche symbol painted on Johnson's horse. Johnson owned only mules. Cleveland supported his claim by telling an assemblage of smoking and spitting pinriders a lengthy tale of how he had been kidnapped by Comanches as a child. Using a stick, he drew the familiar Comanche sun, a circle with 4 lines top, bottom, and on each side, into the dirt near Bart Baylor's left boot. This detail was enough to convince Bucky that Johnson's ranch must be in Comanche territory. Unfortunately for Bucky and Bart, Cleveland, who was born in Pennsylvania, had not been kidnapped as a child. Cleveland's parents had not died at the hands of savage redskins. In fact, his mother still lived with family in a comfortable home located alongside the Monongahela River south of Pittsburgh. The inveterate liar made the entire thing up, hoping to parlay his grim narrative about life among the savages into a few rounds of drinks at the Pennyback later that afternoon. Cleveland's ruse proved successful in that respect. Loaded with enough food to feed 6 men for a month, and several other items the mercantile owner said could be used for trade with the Indians, Bucky and Bart rolled out of town late on a Tuesday, 5 days after Doreen climbed into the back of Cecil Johnson's second wagon. They drove along the well-maintained Santa Fe Trail for 5 more days before deciding to turn south. Despite directions given by many well-meaning farmers and fellow travelers, they felt increasingly uncertain of their destination. "Finding that girl ain't gonna be so easy." Bucky, sweltering in the still cool early May weather, wiped sweat from his eyes. "Maybe it wasn't such a good idea for us to come. I can understand why Mr. Hallam decided to send us instead of getting somebody with a little more trail riding experience. He sent us because you told him how we knew this part of the country. All I said was we had some folks down in Texas and had looked into riding this way. You told him we already rode through here a few times and knew the way. Well, we do know the way from letters and such. We do have them folks down in Fort Worth country, and they writ Mama before she died. Yeah, but we ain't never been down there, so you lied to Mr. Helm. Well, if it was such a problem, why didn't you speak up and tell him how I was lying? I ain't the kind to call out my own kin in front of his employers, why? Plus, I figured this might be more interesting than just hanging around the stockyard. I get wore out busting up hay bales and scooping cow shit. I didn't reckon on it being so dang hot. It ain't no cooler than Abilene. Plus out here we ain't got to smell them rotten hides all day from the leather makers. Danged if that ain't the most sickening smell. Look off over there." Bucky noticed a group of riders to the west. Both men squinted into the glaring sunlight as a pack of 10 horsemen moved their way. "Dang, them's Indians," Bart whispered. "Should we stop the wagon?" Bucky clutched his rifle, chambering a shell. "I ain't sure." Bart stopped as the group arrived. Some of the braves immediately began circling, leaning in to examine the wagon's contents. One rider, an intelligent-looking man with piercing eyes, addressed the fat twins in crisp English.
"What are you men doing in these parts?"
"We're traveling just like honest citizens, I reckon." Bucky spoke loudly. Bravado and bullying had served him well in the past.
"This country belongs to the people. You don't appear to be citizens of the Comanche nation. Are you citizens of the people's land?"
The spokesman glared at Bucky.
"No, we're citizens of Kansas and the United States of America. Ain't we in America?"
"I just told you, you are on the people's land. Is your hearing bad?"
"No. Are you sure we ain't in Kansas?"
"I'm sure."
The translator turned and spoke in his tribal language. His comments drew whoops and laughter from the other warriors.
We're just passing through is all."
One of the warriors dismounted and began digging through the contents of the wagon. A moment later he retrieved a Kansas sack and tossed it to a fellow rider.
"There's our bacon!"
Bart, his love of salt pork conquering his fear, blurted the words loudly. The translator raised an eyebrow at the rotund twins' challenging note.
"It looks to me like you have plenty to eat. If you want to travel through our land, there is a toll."
The spokesman grinned.
"Taking one small sack will leave you with more room for the buffalo hides. Now I ask again, why are you men in these parts?"
"Well, we
Bucky felt his nerves slipping, and he began to babble.
"What happened was this gal run off, and my boss, a gentleman back in Abilene, her daddy, had a conniption over the whole deal. So anyway, we was looking round town and found out that she was going to get on the first wagon leaving town, and we figured that might just be exactly what she did. So anyhow, we sat around and we decided a couple of us ought to come out to these parts because—"
Bucky trailed off, but his brother took up the narrative.
"Because we figured out on the day she turned up missing, there weren't but 2 wagons in town. Or at any rate, there weren't but 2 leaving town. There's plenty of wagons, but of course most of them ain't heading much anywhere except round town or near town and such. Anyhow, this here young lady disappeared. We figured anyway, may have gotten into—"
Okay.
The translator waved his hands in frustration. He raised a finger, then turned and spent several seconds conversing with his fellow tribesmen. When he turned back, he asked,
"Are you men here to hunt buffalo?"
"No, sir. Hell, we ain't even got but 1 rifle, and it ain't no big 50, Bart added. "And we brought along some things for y'all. We heard how it's courteous to have some gifts and such for the folks in this part, so we brought along some—"
"We don't want your beads. Who is this man you are looking for?"
"Well, his name is Johnson. He raises mules somewhere in these parts. He brought in a good herd to Abilene, and the man we worked for bought the whole lot. They were for fine-looking stock, or he wouldn't have done no business with colored."
Bart snatched a second side of bacon and held it tightly in his lap as the braves resumed digging through the contents of the wagon. One warrior boldly attempted to snatch the bacon from Bart, but the spokesman motioned him away. A conflict between the warriors ensued, the group shouting and brandishing their weapons not only at Bart but at one another. The chaos ended abruptly, however, when one of the men, a broad-shouldered warrior astride a black stallion, spoke sharply in his native tongue. The warrior on the black horse, clearly their leader, motioned the group into a circle. A lengthy discussion ensued. One of the braves spoke for several seconds and pointed in an easterly direction. A moment later, the translator turned once more to Bucky and Bart. "You men are lucky. My braves and their families have plenty to eat. Otherwise, we would take everything. As it stands, we will only take half. We know that fat men need lots to eat."
"There ain't no call to be rude,"
Bart complained. "It's not rude to tell a man the truth." The spokesman raised one eyebrow at Bart. "You are both fat. It is a fact. My pony couldn't carry either of you. Never mind, though. Quanah thinks he knows where you might find the man you are looking for. For that other bag of bacon and 2 of your mules, I'll tell you where he is."
"Dang, Bucky, we can't give him all our bacon,"
Bart said, clutching the bag tightly.
"We won't be left with nothing but beans and cornbread making."
"Beans and cornbread are more than white men leave for us."
"Give him the bacon,"
Bucky said.
"Why do we gotta give up our only meat? Why can't he take a bag of beans? Brother, you got to barter with these people." "He didn't ask for the beans. Now give him the bacon."
"We could just kill you and take the bacon," the translator said. Bart looked at the native warrior, then down at the bag of bacon, then back at the warrior, then back at the bacon. Finally he nodded and passed the cured pork over to the translator. The native spokesman tossed the bag onto the ground about 10 feet away. One of the braves rode forward and, sliding down along the side of his pony, lifted the bag neatly from the ground. The action inspired a chorus of whoops from the group. "Quanah says there is a man who lives many days to the east with the Muskogee. This man raises many mules. The Muskogee are known as civilized Indians, while we are just savages. You will like them better than you like us."
"How many miles are we talking about?"
Bucky asked.
"I do not know miles. 5 or 6 days, maybe more. The country is not good for wagons."
"Oh, hell," Bucky murmured. "Can we drive through these parts?"
"You can drive anywhere you like, but you're wasting time here. The man you seek is many days to the east. If Quanah catches you shooting buffalo, he will kill you both and make a feast for his dogs from your fat bodies."
"What's the likelihood of meeting up with this Quanah fella?"
Bart looked around uneasily. The spokesman laughed and then turned and spoke to the group of braves. This time there was a chorus of laughter. The warrior on the black stallion gave his pony a nudge, separating himself from the line.
"This is Quanah,"
the spokesman said. Quanah nodded to one of the braves. The man unhitched the second mule team from the rear of Bucky and Bart's wagon. Quanah gave them a whistle and a wave, and the group of Comanche warriors turned and trotted away. In today's Plate of History Beans, we will hear part 1 of a 3-part series on the life of Quahati Comanche Chief Quanah Parker. One of the most notable of all Native Americans is Quanah Parker. Almost everything about the man is intriguing. He is literally and figuratively a man of 2 nations. Since I want to keep these Plates of History Beans brief, I'm going to break up Quanah's story into 3 and possibly 4 segments. This first section will center around Quanah's parents, Cynthia Ann Parker and Peta Nakona. They are nearly as interesting as their son Quanah. Quanah's mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, a white woman, was kidnapped as a child by the Comanche people in 1936 in what was called the Fort Parker Massacre. She was 9 at the time. Other members of her family, who weren't killed, were taken by the Comanche during the raid, but only Cynthia and her brother John survived. Not much is known about Cynthia's life with the Comanche, except to say she integrated fully into the nomadic tribal culture. At some point, she even married a Comanche chief and had 3 children: Quanah, the oldest, Pecos, or Pecan, Quanah's brother, and Prairie Flower. Later, Cynthia was captured by a group of Texas Rangers led by a man named Sullivan, or Sul Ross. It is interesting that when Cynthia was initially retaken following the Battle of Pease River, the Rangers didn't recognize her as white. It only became apparent later when they took the time to look at her closely and saw that she had blue eyes. It was only then they recognized they had found the little girl kidnapped almost 25 years earlier. It should be noted that after she was recaptured, Cynthia was desperate to return to her life with the Comanche and tried several times to escape what she considered captivity with the whites. Cynthia probably suffered more than anyone in this story. She was separated from her boys, Quanah and Pecos, though she did have Prairie Flower with her at the time of recapture. Sadly, both Pecos and Prairie Flower would die before they reached adulthood. Pecos died at the age of 13 or 14 in the Texas Panhandle, perhaps near a Comanche settlement near current-day Lubbock, Texas. Prairie Flower would die of influenza with her mother at the age of 5 in Anderson, Texas. As a side note, here's a fascinating photo of Cynthia taken after her recapture. Notice that her right breast is exposed and she's nursing Prairie Flower. This picture, I believe, speaks volumes about Cynthia's situation. No white woman of the time would have been photographed in such a way. It shows how Cynthia no longer fit into white society. She was regarded by her family and white people in general as a curiosity and was made an outsider. To me, this picture shows how Cynthia had become a sort of curiosity, a woman with no real home other than the one she was forcibly kept from returning to. The bottom line is Cynthia never felt at home in the white man's world and longed to return to her life with the Comanche until her death in 1871. Peta Nakona, Quanah's father, was the son of Chief Iron Jacket. Peta would become one of the most famous Indian chieftains of the time, not just because he fathered 3 children with a white woman, but because of his exploits in battle. In a sense, Peta was there for the heyday of Comanche dominance when the Plains Indians held reign over the Texas Panhandle, the Oklahoma Panhandle, parts of Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. Peta led his warriors with the Nakoni branch of the Comanche tribe into battle numerous times for nearly 2 decades, from 1840 through 1860. Though his exploits aren't well recorded, we know the man stole hundreds of, perhaps thousands of horses, and amongst his people was held in the highest esteem. Most historians believe that Peta died at the Battle of Pease River in 1861. Texas Ranger Sul Ross made claims he personally killed Peta at Pease River, but didn't do so until 10 years after Peta's death. Sul Ross's story was disputed by both Cynthia and Parker and Quanah. Quanah claimed that his father lived several years after the battle and met many white men, including an army colonel named Nye, a factoid verified by a historian of the time, John Henry Brown. In my novel Hunting Charm, Peta is still alive in the early 1870s and has an important supporting role in the story. I would point out that my novel is purely fictional and there are no historical accounts to support its veracity. I apologize to any of Chief Nakona's family for my artistic license and would simply say I have the greatest regard for your cultural heritage. The final note I want to make about Cynthia Ann Parker involves Quanah later in life. I'll cover those days in my third section on Quanah, but this detail belongs here. Quanah, unlike his mother, integrated fairly well into white society in his later years. He gained enough influence that he was able to move his mother's and sister's body to a cemetery in southwest Oklahoma near the present-day city of Lawton. That's it for today's chapter of Hunting Charm and Plate of History Beans. Once more, if you like my channel, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button. I'll be back next week with another chapter from Hunting Charm and another plate of history beans.